last part that we'll go through. Already kind of went through that. Let me pose a particular scenario. This doesn't need to be something that you guys are experiencing, facing, but like I want to hear your thoughts on it. So consider this. We have sort of this constant intake of movies, shows, cinema, series, like all manner of entertainment. And as we're seeing, it slowly sort of gears the way that you think, you act, etc. Right? Okay. The vast majority of that would be secular. Yeah? Then, we spend nowhere near the same amount of time with anything vaguely like formative in terms of like the Christian narrative. Yeah? Okay. So where does that leave you? Like what would that sort of mean for the average person? You're on a steady diet of this and you get none of this. What does that give you? Let me venture an answer. So you develop a rather sophisticated secular worldview as a default, and so now whenever you think to ask questions about the faith, you're always asking from the foundation of a secular worldview.
Does everyone know what like a worldview is?
Like a way that you see life, everything around you, the way that you understand how things work. Yeah. Sorry. And so, whenever you try to engage with another worldview, you're always on the back foot. Yeah. You're always asking primary school level questions. You're always engaging at a very shallow level if your foundation is something other than what you're asking about. Does that make sense? Right? So that, I mean, one litmus test, there are take chemistry, litmus test, yeah, like one way to see sort of how secular your worldview or how maybe movie or series informed your worldview is. If something happens to you and you reference a book, a movie, or whatever, to describe what's just happened to you, where does your mind usually go?
Past.
Yeah, it's something in the past, but I'm trying to think of... How about a specific example?
An emotion in you?
Not quite an emotion. Let me get an example and hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. Okay, this is perfect then. I'm going to say a phrase, you guys tell me as quick as you can where it's from. Yeah? No soup for you. Right, sweet. How many people knew that? Alright, sweet. Yeah. Right. So, as a collective, our sort of communal identity has as a little nugget in it, Seinfeld. Yeah? Like part of what we think and say and like the references that we know and link with each other is Seinfeld. Right? That's one of the ways in which we talk with each other. It's weird, it's so bizarre, but it's there, right? Does anyone have any others? Like, right.
Pivot. Friends. Yes. Yeah.
How many people knew that reference? I guess even more. Okay, sweet.
How you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I mean when I say when you're trying to think about your own life and you're looking for references, the references that are available are from the things that you watch, are from your past, the things that you consume. And one of the big things that we consume, movies, series, etc. And so Seinfeld, Friends, etc. becomes a matrix within which we discuss and sort of view our lives. right? That's one of the ways in which movies affect, series affect, the way in which we think and act, right? Okay.
That's why you play charades with people you don't know very well, like the first time ever, you know, because it's like a common thing to connect.
Exactly. I mean, at the most basic level, it's a language within a language. It's a way of like sharing meaning that you've just agreed upon, and everyone knows it. Well, almost everyone knows it. Okay, so then the question is, how exactly do we correct, guide, align, fix, focus on what we should? What sort of narrative is available for us to latch on to? Yeah. What system of narrative stories do we have? Yeah? I mean, there's a really obvious answer this way. Right, yeah. The Bible and the tradition of the church, right? So the lives of the saints, etc. Okay? Now, I want to kind of show one little video. It's like 4 minutes or something. And see if you get a bit of what's going on. Part of the reason I want to show this is because I feel that it's important, as much as we spend time with, whatever series and entertainment we're into, the more time we spend with it, the deeper it goes, right? If you want to combat that, you need to spend time with something else, yeah? The ideal would be scripture, right? But, I mean, the world of, like, what is positive, is sort of scripture and the tradition and, like, other stories as well. But let's start with scripture. Anyone more?
So the Bible is a collection of books written in different literary styles, like narrative, poetry, and prose. And most of us are familiar with these kinds of literature.
Yeah, we all know a narrative when we see one, like The Hunger Games or The Great Gatsby.
And most people can recognize poetry, whether it's Walt Whitman or the songs of Bob Dylan.
And every day we're surrounded by prose and news articles or essays.
Now, all of these examples are modern American literature, in that they came from this time period and this region of the world.
But there's also medieval English literature from another place in time, or ancient Greek writings from this place in time.
So each time period and culture produces its own unique kind of literature.
And in order to read the Bible well, we need to keep in mind that it comes from this part of the world and was produced in this basic period of time.
So what's unique about ancient Jewish literature?
Well, a key feature is that it lacks a lot of the details that modern readers have come to expect in stories and poems.
And this makes it seem really simple.
But actually, it's very sophisticated literature. Every detail that is given matters.
And that's great, but the lack of detail means that stories are often loaded with ambiguities. I mean, take one of the first stories, Adam and Eve in the garden. Where did this talking snake come from? And why did God allow him there? Why didn't Adam and Eve die on the spot like God said they would? And who's this offspring of the woman who will destroy the snake but is bitten by it?
Yeah, so many puzzles in this story. And some of these are questions that we have and that are not important to what the author is focusing on. But some of these ambiguities are intentional.
Intentional? Won't that lead to bad interpretations, people filling in the gaps with their own answers?
Well, that's a risk the biblical authors took in writing this way. We all tend to impose our own cultural assumptions onto the Bible, but they apparently thought the risk was worth it. These oddities are really invitations into an adventure of reading and discovery.
What do you mean?
Well, for example, the strange promise about the offspring of the woman crushing and being bitten by the snake. That word offspring is a clue to pay attention to genealogies, which, lo and behold, run all through the biblical narrative. They trace the lineage from Eve all the way to King David and his offspring. And in the New Testament, Jesus is connected to the offspring of this royal line. Now, when you read the prophets, Isaiah connected this king to the suffering servant who would die on behalf of his people. And then, in the book of Revelation, there's this symbolic vision. And can you guess? It's about a woman and her offspring. It's Jesus and his followers who conquer the dragon by giving up their lives.
Yeah, so each part of the story there is loaded with ambiguities, but altogether it makes sense.
And this is the literary genius of the Bible. It forces you to keep reading and then interpret each part in light of the others.
This is feeling complicated. I don't know if I can do all that.
Well, you're actually not expected to notice all of this by yourself or all at once. This dense way of writing forces you to slow down and then read carefully, embarking on this interactive discovery process through the whole biblical narrative over a lifetime of reading and rereading.
Ah, okay. Meditation literature.
Yeah, in Psalm 1, we read about the ideal Bible reader. It's someone who meditates on the scriptures day and night. In Hebrew, the word meditate means literally to mutter or speak quietly. The idea is that every day for the rest of your life, you slowly, quietly read the Bible out loud to yourself. And then go talk about it with your friends, pondering the puzzles, making connections, and discovering what it all means. And as you let the Bible interpret itself, something remarkable happens. The Bible starts to read you. Because ultimately, the writers of the Bible want you to adopt this story as your story.
So this ancient Jewish writing style, it must create unique types of narrative in poetry and discourse.
Yes, and we'll explore all of those literary styles, starting next with biblical narrative.
All right, so the last sort of thing I want to go through. So, yeah, no, useful, not useful. Yeah, okay, sweet. One thing that I wanted to pick up on was right at the end, but this said, she made the same point, he made the same point as the lady in the first video made. The idea of the narratives not just being interpreted by you, but interpreting you. So you inhabit the narrative inhabits you. For example, when I suffer, I run to the book of Job because this is the paradigm of someone who suffers. But at the same, so that's like me enlisting a story for my own help. But then the other way, there is a story that can enlist you, which is Christ. Yeah? He comes on earth and you now become the body of Christ. You continue Acts, you continue. So you are now enlisted in Jesus' narrative. Does that make sense? So there is an engagement that goes beyond just reading. And the lady in the first video was saying that the kids were not just watching the videos as artifacts. They were now seeing themselves in the movies, right? So this would be your first point of call for combating that culture, yeah? I don't want to sort of go on for too much, but if you want like other literature, good secular and non-secular, that will help you engage with useful issues and all the rest, by all means come, we'll chat for like hours. But the idea is at the very least, start here, because like we usually have this idea, or not usually, I've heard this idea of, I read secular literature because I want to sort of engage with the world, yeah? Like it's almost an evangelism that I need to do, right? Jesus said, go out and make disciples of all the nations. So that's what I'm doing by watching Game of Thrones. Like I'm engaging with the nations. But like that can only ever work if you understand the Christian narrative, yeah? And that starts there. Are there any questions, thoughts, feelings that we need to get out? We're good? All right. Any announcements or whatever? Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
I don't have any announcements. I did forget my cross at home, but other than that, I'm good.
Not sure if you're